March 13th, 2019, 9:30 a.m., New York Stock Exchange. The opening bell rings. Within seconds, Boeing's stock price begins to fall, not gradually, catastrophically. In the first minute of trading, the stock drops 5%. By 10 a.m., it's down 10%. By market close, Boeing has lost $27 billion in market value in a single day. In Boeing's Chicago headquarters, CEO Dennis Muilenburg watches the carnage on a Bloomberg terminal. His phone is ringing constantly. Board members, investors, airline CEOs, all demanding answers. 3 days ago, an Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX crashed.
The Ethiopian Airlines flight lunged into the ground,
killing 157 people. It's the second crash of a MAX in 5 months, and now, aviation authorities around the world are grounding the entire fleet. 387 aircraft, grounded indefinitely. Muilenburg knows what this means. Every day the MAX is grounded costs Boeing millions in lost revenue. Airlines will demand compensation. Victims' families will sue. Regulators will investigate. And when they do, they'll discover something that Muilenburg has known for years. The 737 MAX was never as safe as Boeing claimed. The decisions that led to this moment were made years ago, in boardrooms just like this one. Decisions to prioritize speed over safety. Decisions to cut corners on testing. Decisions to hide critical information from pilots and regulators. Decisions that seemed rational at the time, necessary even, to compete with Airbus and satisfy Wall Street. But now, watching $27 billion evaporate in a single day, Muilenburg realizes the true cost of those decisions. And this is just the beginning. Before this crisis is over, Boeing will lose $60 billion in market value, pay billions more in fines and settlements, and see its century-old reputation destroyed. This is the story of the most expensive corporate mistake in aviation history. A mistake that didn't happen in 6 minutes during a crash. It happened over 6 years in boardrooms, where executives chose profit over principle and speed over safety. And it all started with a simple question. How do we beat Airbus? To understand how Boeing fell so far, you need to understand how high they once stood. July 15th, 1916. William Boeing, a timber magnate from Seattle, founded the Pacific Aero Products Company with a single vision: to build aircraft that were safer, stronger, and more reliable than anything else in the sky. Within a year, he renamed it Boeing Airplane Company. Within a decade, he was building planes for the US military. But Boeing's true legacy was built in the decades after World War II. In 1958, they introduced the 707, the jet that made commercial air travel accessible to millions. In 1969, they unveiled the 747, the Queen of the Skies, an aircraft so iconic that it became synonymous with the golden age of aviation. By the 1990s, Boeing controlled 70% of the global commercial aircraft market. Boeing wasn't just a company, it was an engineering religion. Walk into Boeing's headquarters in Seattle, and you'd find engineers who had spent their entire careers there. These weren't just employees, they were disciples of aviation. They believed that safety was sacred, that engineering excellence was non-negotiable, that you never, ever compromised on quality. There was a saying inside Boeing: if it's not Boeing, I'm not going. Pilots said it, passengers said it, airlines said it. For decades, Boeing aircraft were considered the safest in the world. When you stepped onto a Boeing plane, you knew you were in the hands of people who cared more about getting you home safely than anything else. In 1997, Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas in a $13 billion deal that made them the largest aerospace company in the world. On paper, it looked like a triumph. Boeing had absorbed their biggest competitor and now controlled an even larger share of the market. But something changed after that merger. Something subtle at first, then undeniable. The engineers who had built Boeing's reputation started noticing a shift in priorities. Executives from McDonnell Douglas, a company known for cost-cutting and financial engineering, rather than actual engineering, began taking leadership positions. In 2001, Boeing moved its headquarters from Seattle, where the planes were built, to Chicago, where the money was managed. The distance was symbolic. Leadership was no longer sitting on the factory floor listening to engineers, understanding the planes. They were in boardrooms, looking at spreadsheets, optimizing quarterly earnings. And in those boardrooms, a decision was being made that would eventually kill 346 people. December 1st, 2010, American Airlines, one of the world's largest carriers, makes an announcement that sends shockwaves through Boeing's headquarters. They're ordering 460 new aircraft, but they're not ordering them from Boeing. They're ordering them from Airbus, Boeing's European rival. Specifically, they're ordering the Airbus A320neo, a re-engineered version of Airbus's popular A320 that promises to be 15% more fuel efficient than existing models. For airlines, fuel is one of their biggest expenses. 15% savings means hundreds of millions of dollars over the lifetime of the aircraft. The A320neo is a game changer. Inside Boeing, panic sets in. For decades, they had dominated the single-aisle aircraft market with their 737. But now Airbus is eating their lunch. If Boeing doesn't respond and fast, they risk losing their most profitable product line. The obvious solution is to design a new aircraft from scratch. Boeing's engineers have been begging for this for years. They have plans for a clean sheet design that would be more efficient, more advanced, more competitive. But there's a problem: time and money. Designing a new aircraft from the ground up takes 10 to 15 years and costs $15 to $20 billion. Boeing doesn't have that kind of time. Airlines are placing orders with Airbus right now. Every month Boeing delays is another month of lost market share. Enter Dennis Muilenburg. In 2015, he becomes Boeing's CEO. Muilenburg is not an engineer by training. He's a business executive who rose through the ranks during the McDonnell Douglas era. He's known for his focus on shareholder value, operational efficiency, and hitting quarterly targets. Wall Street loves him. Muilenburg faces an impossible choice: spend 15 years and $20 billion designing a new plane and watch Airbus dominate the market in the meantime, or find a faster, cheaper solution that can compete with the A320neo immediately. He chooses speed. He chooses cost-cutting. He chooses a decision that will eventually kill 346 people and cost Boeing $60 billion. He decides to re-engine the 737. The problem with re-engining the 737 is that the 737 was designed in the 1960s. It's a low-slung aircraft, meaning the engines sit close to the ground. This was fine for the small, narrow engines of the 1960s, but modern fuel-efficient engines are massive, almost twice the diameter of the originals. When Boeing's engineers tried to fit these larger engines onto the 737, they ran into a physics problem. The engines were too big to fit in the normal position under the wings, so they had to move them forward and upward, mounting them higher and further ahead on the wing than on any previous 737. This created a new problem: aerodynamic instability. With the engines in this new position, the aircraft had a tendency to pitch nose up during certain flight conditions, particularly at high speeds and steep angles of attack. If left uncorrected, this could lead to a stall, a catastrophic loss of lift that can cause a plane to fall from the sky. Boeing's engineers knew this. They had identified the problem early in the design process. The proper solution would have been to redesign the airframe, change the wing structure, adjust the fuselage, rebalance the aircraft. But that would take years and cost billions. It would defeat the entire purpose of the re-engine strategy. So instead, Boeing decided to fix a hardware problem with software. They developed a system called MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. MCAS was designed to automatically push the nose down if the aircraft's angle of attack became too steep, preventing a stall. On paper, it seemed like an elegant solution. In practice, it was a disaster waiting to happen. And here's where Boeing made the decisions that would prove fatal. Fatal decision number 1: single point of failure. MCAS relied on data from a single angle of attack sensor, a small vane on the outside of the fuselage that measures the angle of the aircraft relative to the oncoming air. If that sensor malfunctioned and gave a false reading, MCAS would activate when it shouldn't, pushing the nose down, even though the plane was flying normally. Boeing's engineers knew this was dangerous. Industry standard for critical flight systems is redundancy, multiple sensors. So if one fails, others can override it. But redundancy adds weight and cost. Boeing decided a single sensor was acceptable. Fatal decision number 2: concealment from pilots. Boeing decided not to tell pilots about MCAS. It wasn't mentioned in the flight manual. It wasn't included in pilot training. The reasoning was that MCAS was supposed to work invisibly in the background, and informing pilots would require additional training, which would make the 737 MAX less attractive to airlines. Airlines wanted a plane that their pilots could fly without expensive retraining, so Boeing assured them that the 737 MAX flew just like previous 737 models. It was a lie. Fatal decision number 3. Regulatory capture. Boeing had become so powerful, so trusted, that the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, responsible for certifying aircraft safety, had essentially outsourced much of the certification process to Boeing itself. Boeing employees were allowed to perform safety assessments on their own aircraft. The foxes were guarding the henhouse. When Boeing told the FAA that MCAS was a minor system that didn't require additional pilot training, the FAA believed them. Inside Boeing, there were engineers who raised concerns. In internal emails later obtained by investigators, Boeing employees expressed alarm about the 737 MAX's safety. One engineer wrote, "This airplane is designed by clowns, who are in turn supervised by monkeys." Another wrote, "Would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft? I wouldn't." But these warnings were ignored. The pressure to compete with Airbus, to hit delivery targets, to satisfy Wall Street, was too great. On March 9, 2017, the FAA certified the 737 MAX as safe to fly. Airlines began taking delivery, passengers began boarding, and the countdown to catastrophe had begun. October 29, 2018, 6:20 a.m., Java Sea, Indonesia. Lion Air Flight 610 takes off from Jakarta, bound for Pangkal Pinang. It's a routine domestic flight, barely an hour long. The aircraft is a brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8, delivered to Lion Air just 2 months earlier. It has logged only 800 flight hours. In the cockpit are Captain Bavye Suneja, 31 years old, and First Officer Harvino, 41. Behind them, 189 passengers and crew settle in for what they expect to be an uneventful flight. At 6:20 a.m., just 2 minutes after takeoff, the pilots notice something wrong. The plane's airspeed indicator and altitude readings are erratic. Then, suddenly, the nose pitches down. Captain Suneja pulls back on the control column. The nose lifts. Then, 10 seconds later, it pitches down again. Harder this time. What the pilots don't know, what Boeing never told them, is that MCAS has activated. The angle of attack sensor on the captain's side of the aircraft is malfunctioning, sending false data that the plane is in danger of stalling. MCAS interprets this as a crisis and does what it was programmed to do. It pushes the nose down to prevent a stall that isn't happening. Captain Suneja and First Officer Harvino are confused. They don't know about MCAS. They don't know that a hidden system is fighting them for control of the aircraft. They do what they were trained to do. They pull back on the control column, trying to keep the nose up. But every time they do, MCAS waits 10 seconds and pushes the nose down again. It's a tug of war between human and machine, and the machine is winning. The cockpit voice recorder captures their confusion, their frustration, their growing panic. They're flipping through checklists, trying to diagnose the problem. They're communicating with air traffic control, reporting erratic instruments. They're doing everything right, but they're fighting an enemy they don't know exists. For 11 minutes, they battle the aircraft. 26 times, MCAS pushes the nose down. 26 times, the pilots pull it back up. They're exhausted. Their arms are aching from pulling on the control column with all their strength. And then, at 6:31 a.m., MCAS activates one final time. This time, the pilots can't recover. The nose pitches down violently. The aircraft enters a dive. The speed increases. 400 miles per hour, 450. The pilots pull back with everything they have, but it's not enough. At 6:33 a.m., 11 minutes after takeoff, Flight 610 slams into the Java Sea at 450 miles per hour. The impact is catastrophic. The aircraft disintegrates on contact. There are no survivors. 189 people are dead. In the hours after the crash, Boeing issues a statement expressing condolences and promising to support the investigation. Privately, Boeing executives believe this is an isolated incident, likely caused by pilot error or poor maintenance by Lion Air, an airline with a troubled safety record. They're wrong. March 10, 2019, 8:38 a.m., Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. 4 months and 12 days after Lion Air 610, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 takes off from Addis Ababa, bound for Nairobi. The aircraft is a Boeing 737 MAX 8. In the cockpit are Captain Yared Getachew and First Officer Ahmed Nur Mohammed, experienced pilots with thousands of flight hours. At 8:39 a.m., 1 minute after takeoff, the exact same sequence of events begins. The angle of attack sensor malfunctions, MCAS activates, the nose pitches down, the pilots fight back. But this time, they know about MCAS. After the Lion Air crash, Boeing had issued a bulletin warning pilots about the system and explaining how to disable it. Captain Getachew and First Officer Mohammed follow the procedure. They flip the switches to disable MCAS. For a moment, it seems to work, but the aircraft is now in a dive, and pulling it out manually requires immense physical strength. They're pulling on the control column with everything they have, but the aircraft is too heavy, the speed too great. At 8:44 a.m., 6 minutes after takeoff, Flight 302 crashes into a field near the town of Bishoftu. The impact is so violent that the aircraft buries itself 30 feet into the ground. There are no survivors. 157 people are dead. Within hours, aviation authorities around the world begin grounding the 737 MAX. Within days, the entire global fleet, 387 aircraft, is grounded. It's the fastest, most comprehensive grounding in aviation history. Boeing's stock price plummets. Airlines demand answers. Families of the victims demand justice. And investigators begin the painstaking work of uncovering exactly how Boeing, one of the most trusted names in aviation, had built and sold an aircraft that killed 346. In the months following the Ethiopian Airlines crash, investigators from the FAA, the NTSB, and international aviation authorities begin piecing together what went wrong. What they discover is not just a technical failure, but a systemic breakdown in corporate culture, regulatory oversight, and ethical responsibility. In October 2019, the House Transportation Committee subpoenas Boeing's internal communications. What they find is damning. Hundreds of emails and instant messages reveal that Boeing employees knew about problems with the 737 MAX and MCAS long before the first crash. In one email from 2016, a Boeing test pilot named Mark Faulkner tells a colleague that MCAS is running rampant in flight simulators and that he's having trouble controlling the aircraft. He writes, "So I basically lied to the regulators, unknowingly." Later, in a text message, he asks, "Would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft?" "I wouldn't." In another email, a Boeing employee writes, "This airplane is designed by clowns, who are in turn supervised by monkeys." Another employee describes the 737 MAX as a joke and says that Boeing is inviting the FAA to scrutinize us. These weren't rogue employees. These were engineers and test pilots, the people who understood the aircraft better than anyone, and they were terrified. But their warnings never reached senior leadership, or if they did, they were ignored. The pressure to compete with Airbus, to hit delivery targets, to satisfy Wall Street was too great. In October 2019, Dennis Muhlenberg is called to testify before Congress. It's a brutal hearing. Lawmakers, armed with the internal emails, grill him on what he knew and when he knew it. Representative Peter DeFazio asks Muhlenberg directly, "Did you read these emails before the Ethiopian crash?" Muhlenberg hesitates. "I don't remember specifically reading those emails." "You don't remember? These emails are about safety concerns with an aircraft that had already killed 189 people, and you don't remember reading them." Muhlenberg has no good answer. He apologizes. He expresses condolences to the families, but he offers no real accountability. He doesn't resign. He doesn't accept personal responsibility. He deflects, blames processes, promises reforms. Behind him, sitting in the gallery, are family members of the crash victims. Some are crying. Some are staring at him with barely contained rage. One holds a framed photograph of her daughter, who died on Ethiopian Flight 302. She's 22 years old in the photo, smiling, full of life. Now she's gone, and the man responsible is offering corporate platitudes. By the end of 2019, the financial toll on Boeing is staggering. The 737 MAX has been grounded for 9 months. Airlines are cancelling orders. Boeing has halted production. The company announces a $5.6 billion charge to cover compensation to airlines for the grounding. They set aside another $100 million for families of the victims, an amount that works out to less than $300,000 per victim. But the real cost is much higher. Boeing's stock price has fallen by 25%, wiping out $60 billion in market value. The company reports its first annual loss in more than 2 decades. Credit rating agencies downgrade Boeing's debt. Suppliers are laying off workers. The entire aerospace supply chain is in crisis. In December 2019, Boeing's board of directors finally acts. They fire Dennis Muilenburg. He leaves with a severance package worth $62 million. The families of the 346 people killed by his decisions receive a fraction of that. The 737 MAX crisis didn't just destroy Boeing's reputation, it fundamentally changed how aircraft are certified and how corporations are held accountable for safety failures. In 2020, Congress passed the Aircraft Certification Reform Act, stripping away much of Boeing's self-certification authority and requiring greater FAA oversight. The cozy relationship between Boeing and regulators, the regulatory capture that had allowed MCAS to be approved without proper scrutiny, was over. Other aircraft manufacturers took notice. Airbus, Embraer, and Bombardier all reviewed their own certification processes, looking for similar vulnerabilities. The entire aerospace industry was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The pursuit of profit had been allowed to override the commitment to safety. In November 2020, after 20 months of grounding, extensive software fixes, and mandatory pilot training, the FAA finally recertified the 737 MAX as safe to fly. Airlines began returning the aircraft to service. Passengers, understandably nervous, began boarding again. As of 2024, the 737 MAX has flown millions of hours without another MCAS-related incident. The technical problems have been fixed, but the trust? That will take decades to rebuild. Dennis Muilenburg, fired in disgrace, never worked in aerospace again. He joined the board of a private equity firm and largely disappeared from public life. He never faced criminal charges. He never went to prison. He walked away with $62 million and his freedom. The families of the victims were not so fortunate. In 2021, Boeing agreed to pay $2.5 billion to settle criminal charges, $500 million in compensation to families, $1.7 billion to airlines, and $243 million in fines. The families received, on average, $1.4 million per victim. Some accepted the settlement, others rejected it, calling it blood money, an insult to the memory of their loved ones. Nadia Milaron, whose daughter Samia Stumo died on Ethiopian Flight 302, became one of the most vocal advocates for accountability. She testified before Congress. She met with regulators. She demanded that Boeing executives face criminal prosecution. "My daughter was killed by corporate greed," she said, "and no one has gone to jail." She's right. Despite the evidence of negligence, despite the internal emails showing Boeing employees knew about the dangers, despite the 346 deaths, not a single Boeing executive was criminally charged. The 737 MAX crisis raises questions that extend far beyond aviation. How do we hold corporations accountable when their pursuit of profit leads to death? How do we prevent regulatory capture when the regulated industry has more resources and expertise than the regulators? How do we balance innovation and speed to market with safety and caution? And perhaps most troubling, is this an isolated incident or a symptom of a broader problem in how modern capitalism operates? Boeing's decisions, prioritizing shareholder value over engineering excellence, cutting corners to meet deadlines, concealing problems from regulators, are not unique. They're common in industries from pharmaceuticals to automotive to technology. The 737 MAX didn't crash because of a single bad decision. It crashed because of a culture that valued quarterly earnings over human life, that rewarded executives for hitting financial targets rather than building safe products, that allowed engineers' warnings to be silenced by managers focused on the bottom line. Today, Boeing is still one of the largest aerospace companies in the world. They're still building aircraft. They're still competing with Airbus. They've implemented reforms, changed leadership, and promised that the culture has changed. But here's the question, has it really? Or have they simply learned to hide the problems better? Somewhere, in a boardroom, an executive is facing a similar choice to the one Dennis Muilenburg faced. Speed or safety, profit or principle, Quarterly targets or long-term integrity? What will they choose? And will we only find out when the next plane crashes, the next product fails, the next 346 people die? That's the $60 billion question, and we won't know the answer until it's too late.